Commander Marcus Sullivan stood on the bridge of the USS Valiant, watching the early morning mist rise from the dark waters of Lake Torreon. The massive concrete structure of the Torreon Dam loomed ahead like a sleeping giant, its spillways silent in the pre-dawn darkness. Something felt wrong about this mission from the very beginning, but Marcus had learned to trust his instincts over his 23 years of naval service. The orders had come through encrypted channels just 48 hours earlier. Admiral Richardson's voice had been unusually tense during their secure video conference, his weathered face betraying none of the warmth that Marcus had grown accustomed to over their 15-year professional relationship. The mission briefing was sparse on details but heavy on urgency. Intelligence suggested that a terrorist cell had infiltrated the dam's maintenance crew and planned to detonate explosives that would flood 3 major cities downstream, affecting over 2 million civilians. Marcus had handpicked his team for this operation. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen is executive officer and one of the most brilliant tactical minds he had ever worked with. Chief Petty Officer Jake Rodriguez, a demolitions expert who could disarm a bomb while blindfolded. Petty Officer First Class Amanda Foster, their communications specialist whose ability to maintain secure channels had saved countless lives in previous operations. And finally, Ensign David Park, fresh from the Naval Academy but already proving himself as an exceptional intelligence analyst. The team had spent the previous day studying the dam's blueprints, memorizing every corridor, every access point, every possible escape route. The structure was a marvel of engineering, built during the Cold War with multiple levels of security and redundant systems. What made their mission particularly challenging was the need for absolute secrecy. According to their intelligence, the terrorists had contacts within local law enforcement, making a traditional approach impossible. As the Valiant approached the designated insertion point, Marcus reviewed the mission parameters one final time. They would infiltrate the dam through the underwater maintenance tunnels, locate and neutralize the explosives, and extract before dawn. The timeline was tight, leaving no room for error or delay. What bothered Marcus most was the lack of backup support. Usually, an operation of this magnitude would involve multiple teams and extensive coordination with other branches of the military. This time, they were operating completely alone. Sarah Chen appeared at his side, her expression mirroring his own concerns. She had been unusually quiet during the approach, her analytical mind no doubt processing the same inconsistencies that troubled him. They had worked together long enough that words were often unnecessary between them. A simple glance confirmed that she too sensed something amiss with their orders. The underwater approach began at 030 hours. Using advanced rebreather equipment, the team descended into the murky depths of the lake, following a carefully plotted course toward the dam's foundation. The water was colder than expected, and visibility was limited to just a few feet, even with their enhanced night vision equipment. Marcus led the formation, his movements precise and deliberate despite the challenging conditions. The maintenance tunnel entrance was exactly where the blueprints indicated, hidden beneath a massive concrete overhang. Jake Rodriguez worked quickly to bypass the electronic locks, his fingers dancing across a tablet interface as he hacked into the security system. Within minutes, they had gained access to the tunnel network that honeycombed the dam's interior. The tunnels were a maze of intersecting passages, some wide enough for maintenance vehicles, others barely large enough for a single person. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the concrete walls, and the constant sound of rushing water created an ominous backdrop to their movements. Marcus checked his watch constantly, aware that they had less than 3 hours to complete their mission before the dam's day shift arrived. Amanda Foster established communication links with their surface support vessel while the team moved deeper into the structure. Her equipment was state-of-the-art, capable of maintaining secure channels even through the thick concrete of the dam. However, as they progressed further into the facility, she began reporting intermittent signal degradation that shouldn't have occurred with their advanced technology. David Park's intelligence analysis had identified 3 likely locations for the terrorist explosives based on structural vulnerability assessments. The team split into 2 groups to cover more ground efficiently. Marcus and Sarah would investigate the primary turbine chamber, while Jake, Amanda, and David would check the secondary power generation areas. They maintained constant radio contact, reporting their progress every 15 minutes. The primary turbine chamber was a cathedral-like space filled with massive generators that hummed with barely contained electrical energy. The noise was deafening, forcing Marcus and Sarah to communicate through hand signals as they searched for any signs of tampering or explosive devices. They methodically examined every piece of equipment, every access panel, every possible hiding place where charges might have been concealed. Meanwhile, Jake's team had discovered something unusual in the secondary power area. What appeared to be maintenance equipment positioned near critical support structures didn't match the blueprints they had studied. The devices were sophisticated, clearly not the work of amateur terrorists. Jake's expert eye immediately recognized military-grade explosives, configured in a pattern that would maximize structural damage if detonated simultaneously. As Jake began the delicate process of disarming the first device, Amanda noticed something troubling about their communication signals. The interference patterns she was detecting weren't random or caused by the dam's structure. Someone was actively jamming their frequencies, using equipment that matched their own military specifications. The realization sent a chill through the team that had nothing to do with the cold, damp air of the underground facility. David's analysis of the explosive placement revealed a disturbing pattern. The charges weren't positioned to simply breach the dam and cause flooding. Their configuration suggested a more sophisticated objective, creating a catastrophic failure that would appear to be the result of structural weakness or maintenance negligence. Someone wanted the dam to fail, but they also wanted the failure to look accidental. Marcus received Jake's report about the military-grade explosives with growing unease. Terrorist organizations rarely had access to such sophisticated equipment, and the level of planning evident in the device placement suggested extensive knowledge of the dam's structural vulnerabilities. This wasn't the work of foreign terrorists, as their briefing had indicated. Someone with intimate knowledge of American military capabilities and access to restricted equipment was behind this operation. Sarah's tactical assessment of the situation was equally disturbing. The explosive placement created a scenario where the dam's failure would trigger a cascade of infrastructure collapses downstream. Power grids would fail, emergency services would be overwhelmed, and the resulting chaos would provide perfect cover for other operations. This wasn't terrorism for its own sake. It was preparation for something much larger and more coordinated. As the team worked to disarm the explosives, Amanda's communication problems worsened. Not only were their signals being jammed, but someone was actively monitoring their frequencies and attempting to triangulate their position within the dam. The sophisticated nature of the electronic warfare being conducted against them confirmed their worst suspicions about the true nature of their mission. Jake's expertise proved invaluable as he carefully disarmed each explosive device. However, the process was time-consuming, and they were rapidly approaching their extraction deadline. Each device required different disarmament procedures, suggesting they had been placed by multiple individuals with varying levels of expertise. Some were clearly the work of professionals, while others showed signs of hurried or inexperienced installation. The discovery of the final group of explosives in the dam's control room revealed the true scope of the operation. These devices weren't just designed to cause structural damage. They would have completely disabled the dam's safety systems, preventing any emergency shutdown procedures that might minimize downstream flooding. The level of detailed planning required for such an operation pointed to involvement by individuals with extensive insider knowledge. Marcus made the difficult decision to extend their mission timeline to ensure all explosives were properly disarmed. The risk of discovery increased with every passing minute, but the potential consequences of leaving even a single device operational were unacceptable. His team worked with quiet efficiency, their training and professionalism evident in every movement despite the mounting pressure. As they completed the disarmament process, David's analysis of the explosive components revealed serial numbers and manufacturing marks that traced back to American military contractors. The implications were staggering. Either their own military supplies had been stolen by terrorists, or someone within the American defense establishment was directly involved in planning the dam's destruction. The extraction phase of their mission began just as the first signs of dawn appeared over the lake's surface. The team moved quickly through the tunnel system, but Amanda's monitoring equipment detected multiple vehicles approaching the dam facility. Their window for escape was closing rapidly, and the sophisticated jamming of their communications suggested that their movements were being tracked by hostile forces. As they reached the underwater tunnel entrance, Marcus made a command decision that would prove crucial to their survival. Instead of following their planned extraction route, he ordered the team to use an alternate path that would take them further from their support vessel but provide better concealment from potential surveillance. His instincts warned him that their original extraction plan might have been compromised. The alternate route led them through a section of the lake where underwater rock formations provided natural cover from sonar detection. However, it also required them to travel a much greater distance using their rebreather equipment, pushing the limits of their oxygen supply. Marcus calculated that they would reach their support vessel with minimal air reserves, leaving no margin for error or unexpected delays. As they swam through the dark water toward their extraction point, Sarah noticed unusual sonar pings that didn't match the acoustic signature of their support vessel. Multiple craft were operating in the area, and their movements suggested a coordinated search pattern rather than routine lake traffic. The team was being hunted by forces that possessed sophisticated detection equipment and detailed knowledge of their mission parameters. The realization that they were swimming into a trap crystallized Marcus's growing suspicions about their mission. Someone had wanted them to be at the dam at precisely this time, and that someone had no intention of allowing them to complete their extraction successfully. The terrorist threat had been real enough, but it was only one component of a much larger and more sinister operation targeting his team specifically. The support vessel USS Meridian floated silently on the lake's surface, its crew maintaining radio silence as ordered. Captain Elena Vasquez had commanded the vessel for 8 years, but never had she received orders quite like these. The mission parameters were classified at levels that prevented her from discussing them with anyone outside her immediate command staff. Even her communications officer had been replaced at the last minute with a specialist she didn't recognize, a man who claimed to report directly to naval intelligence. Below the surface, Marcus and his team struggled against time and diminishing oxygen supplies. The alternate extraction route had proven more challenging than anticipated, with underwater debris and unexpected current patterns forcing them to navigate around obstacles that hadn't appeared on their mission maps. Sarah Chen's breathing apparatus showed critical oxygen levels, and Marcus knew they had perhaps 10 minutes before someone would be forced to make an emergency ascent. The sonar contacts Amanda had detected were closing in on their position with methodical precision. Through his underwater headset, Marcus could hear the distinctive acoustic signature of military-grade search equipment, the kind used by special operations forces for underwater recovery missions. But these weren't friendly forces coming to assist with their extraction. The search patterns were too aggressive, too focused on containment rather than rescue. Jake Rodriguez pushed through the pain in his lungs as carbon dioxide buildup began to affect his performance. The demolitions expert had used additional oxygen while working to disarm the complex explosive devices, leaving him with even less breathing time than the rest of the team. His movements became increasingly labored, but he refused to signal distress, knowing that any delay could doom the entire team. David Park's analytical mind worked frantically to piece together the intelligence puzzle they had stumbled into. The explosive devices at the dam hadn't been the work of foreign terrorists. The equipment was too sophisticated, the placement too precise, and the electronic countermeasures too advanced. Someone within their own military command structure had orchestrated the entire operation, but determining their ultimate objective remained elusive. As they approached the coordinates for their extraction point, Marcus used hand signals to communicate with his team. The surface vessels above them had taken positions that would allow them to detect and intercept any underwater approach to the USS Meridian. Their planned extraction had become a carefully prepared trap, and swimming directly toward their support vessel would result in certain capture or worse. Amanda Foster's communication equipment detected multiple encrypted radio transmissions between the surface vessels, but the encryption algorithms were beyond her ability to decode in real time. However, the frequency patterns and transmission timing suggested coordination between forces that should have had no knowledge of their mission. The scope of the conspiracy against them was becoming clear, even if its ultimate purpose remained hidden. Marcus made the difficult decision to abort their planned extraction and seek alternate shelter. The rocky shoreline of the lake offered several underwater caves that could provide temporary refuge while they developed a new escape plan. However, reaching those caves would require swimming in the opposite direction from their support vessel, using the last of their oxygen reserves with no guarantee of finding a safe haven. The team altered course toward the eastern shore of the lake, where geological surveys had identified a series of natural underwater formations. The risk was enormous. If the caves proved inaccessible or already compromised, they would be trapped with no means of escape. But continuing toward their original extraction point would certainly result in capture by hostile forces. Sarah Chen's equipment registered complete oxygen depletion just as they reached the first of the underwater cave systems. Emergency protocols required her to make an immediate ascent to the surface, but doing so would expose the entire team's position to their pursuers. Marcus made a command decision that demonstrated both his tactical expertise and his loyalty to his crew. He shared his remaining oxygen supply through an emergency connection, giving Sarah the breathing time needed to reach potential shelter. The cave system extended further into the shoreline than their maps had indicated, creating a network of air pockets and underwater passages that provided both concealment and breathable atmosphere. Jake Rodriguez used his demolitions expertise in reverse, carefully sealing several cave entrances with controlled rockfalls that would prevent pursuit while maintaining escape routes for the team. In the relative safety of the caves, Marcus finally had an opportunity to contact their support vessel using Amanda's long-range communication equipment. However, the conversation that followed confirmed his worst fears about the nature of their mission. Captain Vasquez reported that she had received new orders to maintain position and await further instructions from naval intelligence, effectively abandoning the extraction of Marcus's team. The replacement communications officer aboard the USS Meridian had taken control of all encrypted communications, claiming authority that superseded Captain Vasquez's command. Marcus recognized the tactics of a carefully orchestrated military coup, where loyal officers were isolated and replaced with individuals whose loyalties lay elsewhere. His team hadn't just stumbled into a terrorist plot, they had been deliberately sent into a trap designed to eliminate them. David Park's intelligence analysis revealed the true scope of the conspiracy during their temporary refuge in the caves. The explosive devices at the dam were part of a larger operation designed to create a national emergency that would justify the implementation of martial law. The destruction of critical infrastructure would provide the pretext for military commanders with questionable loyalties to seize control of key government functions. Amanda's monitoring of radio communications revealed that search teams were being deployed around the entire perimeter of the lake. Military vehicles ostensibly responding to a terrorist threat were establishing checkpoints and roadblocks that would prevent any civilian traffic from entering or leaving the area. The lake was being transformed into an isolated zone where Marcus's team could be eliminated without witnesses. Sarah Chen's tactical assessment of their situation identified several disturbing patterns in the deployment of forces around the lake. The units being positioned weren't from the same command structure, suggesting that multiple branches of the military were involved in the operation. However, their coordination indicated central planning, at a level that could only come from senior Pentagon officials. Jake Rodriguez discovered that the cave system they had taken refuge in connected to an abandoned mining operation that dated back to the early 20th century. The tunnels extended for several miles underground, potentially providing an escape route that would allow them to surface far from the immediate search area. However, the structural integrity of the old mining shafts was questionable, and cave-ins could trap them permanently underground. Marcus realized that their survival depended on reaching the outside world with evidence of the conspiracy they had uncovered. The explosive devices Jake had disarmed contained components that would prove military involvement in the planned destruction of the dam. However, transporting that evidence through miles of unstable underground tunnels while being pursued by hostile forces would test every skill they had acquired during their military careers. The decision to enter the abandoned mine system was complicated by the presence of dangerous gases that had accumulated over decades of disuse. Amanda's equipment detected methane concentrations that could cause explosions if they used any electronic devices or created sparks. They would have to navigate the underground maze using only manual compass readings and their own sense of direction. As they prepared to leave the relative safety of the caves, Marcus received an encrypted message on Amanda's equipment that chilled him to the bone. Admiral Richardson, the officer who had personally briefed him on the dam mission, was demanding his immediate surrender and promising safe passage if the team abandoned their investigation. The admiral's involvement confirmed that the conspiracy reached the highest levels of naval command. David Park's analysis of the message traffic intercepted by Amanda revealed a timetable for the larger operation that extended far beyond the destruction of the dam. Multiple infrastructure targets had been identified for simultaneous attacks, including power grids, communication networks, and transportation hubs. The goal wasn't just to create a national emergency. It was to completely collapse the existing governmental structure. The abandoned mining tunnels proved to be a labyrinth of intersecting passages, many of which had been sealed or blocked by decades of geological activity. Jake Rodriguez used his expertise to identify structurally sound routes while avoiding areas where explosive gases had accumulated. The team moved in single file, maintaining physical contact to prevent anyone from becoming separated in the absolute darkness of the underground maze. Sarah Chen's military training included extensive experience with underground operations, skills that proved invaluable as they navigated the treacherous tunnel system. She identified ventilation shafts that provided fresh air and emergency exits that could be used if they were pursued into the underground network. Her attention to detail and tactical thinking kept the team moving efficiently despite the challenging conditions. Amanda Foster maintained communication monitoring even while underground, using equipment modified to detect transmissions through rock and soil. The hostile forces on the surface were coordinating an increasingly sophisticated search operation, bringing in specialized units trained in underground warfare. Time was running out before their pursuers would locate the cave system and begin their own underground pursuit. The team's progress through the mining tunnels was hampered by frequent cave-ins and flooded passages that forced them to backtrack and find alternative routes. Marcus calculated that they were covering less than a mile per hour, while their pursuers on the surface could deploy resources much more rapidly. The race against time was becoming increasingly desperate as each hour brought their enemies closer to discovering their escape route. Jake Rodriguez's demolitions expertise proved crucial when they encountered a section of tunnel that had been deliberately sealed, probably by mining company engineers who wanted to prevent unauthorized access to dangerous areas. He carefully used small explosive charges to create openings just large enough for the team to pass through, while ensuring that the structural integrity of the surrounding rock remained intact. As they approached what appeared to be an exit from the tunnel system, David Park's analysis of intercepted communications revealed that their escape route had been anticipated by their pursuers. Military units were being positioned at likely exit points from the abandoned mining operation, turning their underground refuge into an elaborate trap. The conspiracy against them had been planned with meticulous attention to detail, accounting for every possible escape scenario. Marcus faced a terrible choice. As they reached the final section of the tunnel system, they could emerge from the underground maze only to face certain capture by hostile forces, or they could remain underground indefinitely, hoping that rescue would eventually arrive. Neither option offered any guarantee of survival, and both required a level of risk that could result in the complete failure of their mission to expose the conspiracy. The tunnel exit emerged behind a wall of rusted mining equipment in a valley 15 miles from the dam. Marcus Sullivan emerged first, his eyes adjusting slowly to the late afternoon sunlight after hours in complete darkness underground. The abandoned mining operation spread across several acres, with deteriorating buildings and machinery that had been left to decay for decades. More importantly, the area appeared to be temporarily free of the military forces that were systematically searching the region around the lake. Sarah Chen conducted a tactical assessment of their immediate surroundings while the rest of the team emerged from the tunnel system. The mining operation offered excellent concealment but limited escape routes if they were discovered. A single access road connected the site to the main highway, and that road could be easily blocked by hostile forces. They needed to move quickly to reach civilization before their enemies realized they had escaped the lake area. Amanda Foster immediately began monitoring radio communications to determine the current status of the search operation. Military units were reporting negative contact at all previously identified hiding spots around the lake, and commanders were beginning to expand their search perimeter. However, the expanded search would take time to organize and deploy, giving Marcus's team a crucial window of opportunity to escape the immediate area. Jake Rodriguez examined the abandoned mining equipment to determine if any vehicles might still be operational. Most of the machinery had been stripped of valuable components years earlier, but he discovered an old maintenance truck hidden in one of the equipment sheds. The vehicle was in poor condition, but Jake's mechanical skills allowed him to get the engine running after bypassing several damaged systems. David Park's intelligence analysis of the intercepted communications revealed disturbing information about the scope of the military operation. Units from multiple bases were being coordinated under emergency protocols that bypassed normal command structures. The conspiracy wasn't limited to a few rogue officers. It involved a coordinated network of military personnel who were prepared to implement what amounted to a military coup against the civilian government. The truck provided transportation, but it also created new risks for the team. The vehicle was old and unreliable, likely to break down at the worst possible moment. Additionally, using roads would expose them to checkpoints and surveillance that the conspirators were rapidly establishing throughout the region. Marcus weighed the risks and decided that the speed provided by the truck outweighed the potential dangers of road travel. As they drove away from the abandoned mining site, Amanda continued monitoring military communications using portable equipment connected to the truck's electrical system. The hostile forces were beginning to realize that their quarry had escaped the immediate search area, and resources were being redirected to establish a wider containment perimeter. Roadblocks were being positioned at strategic locations that would make escape from the region extremely difficult. Sarah Chen used her knowledge of regional geography to plot alternative routes that would avoid major highways and known military installations. Her plan involved using back roads and rural routes that would be less likely to have checkpoints, but would also require much more travel time. The team was racing against time before the conspiracy's next phase began, and every hour of delay increased the risk of complete failure. The truck's radio allowed them to monitor civilian news broadcasts, which provided shocking confirmation of the conspiracy's broader objectives. Reports were beginning to emerge of suspicious activity at multiple infrastructure sites across the country. Power grid failures, communication outages, and transportation disruptions were being attributed to equipment malfunctions and maintenance issues, but the pattern suggested coordinated sabotage operations. Jake Rodriguez's examination of the explosive components they had recovered from the dam revealed serial numbers that could be traced to specific military supply chains. The evidence in their possession would prove that the planned destruction of the dam involved active military personnel rather than foreign terrorists. However, they needed to reach a secure location where that evidence could be properly documented and transmitted to loyal government officials. David Park's continued analysis of intercepted communications identified key figures in the conspiracy who were coordinating operations from a command center located at a military base approximately 200 miles from their current location. The command center was directing multiple simultaneous operations designed to create a national emergency that would justify the implementation of martial law and the suspension of constitutional government. As they traveled through rural areas, using back roads, Marcus made contact with several trusted colleagues using Amanda's secure communication equipment. However, many of the officers he attempted to reach were either unavailable or responded in ways that suggested their communications were being monitored. The conspiracy had penetrated deep into military command structures, making it difficult to determine who could be trusted with sensitive information. The truck suffered its first major breakdown just 50 miles from the mining site, forcing the team to abandon the vehicle and continue on foot through heavily forested terrain. The delay was costly, but the breakdown occurred in an area where they could maintain concealment while Jake worked to repair the engine. His mechanical skills proved sufficient to get the truck running again, but the incident demonstrated how precarious their escape had become. Amanda Foster's monitoring equipment detected increasing levels of electronic surveillance in the areas they were traveling through. Military-grade communication intercept systems were being deployed along major transportation routes, creating an electronic net designed to detect and locate any attempts at unauthorized communication. The team was forced to maintain communication silence, except for brief, coded transmissions that could be easily missed by automated monitoring systems. Sarah Chen's tactical planning identified a small regional airport that might provide an opportunity to escape the area more rapidly than continued ground travel. However, the airport would certainly be under surveillance, and attempting to commandeer an aircraft would require skills that none of the team possessed. The plan was risky, but it offered the possibility of reaching loyal military personnel before the conspiracy's operation could be completed. The truck suffered another breakdown just 20 miles from the regional airport, this time with damage that Jake Rodriguez couldn't repair using available tools and materials. The team was forced to abandon the vehicle and continue on foot through increasingly populated areas where concealment would be much more difficult. They were entering the most dangerous phase of their escape, where any encounter with local law enforcement or military personnel could result in their capture. Marcus made the difficult decision to split the team to maximize their chances of getting evidence of the conspiracy to loyal government officials. Jake and Amanda would continue toward the airport, attempting to locate aircraft or communication facilities that could be used to contact outside authorities. Marcus, Sarah, and David would head toward a nearby military installation, where Marcus had personal contacts who might be trusted with information about the conspiracy. The separation was emotionally difficult for a team that had operated together for years, but it doubled their chances of successful mission completion. If one group was captured, the other might still be able to expose the conspiracy and prevent the implementation of martial law. Both groups carried copies of the evidence recovered from the dam, ensuring that the proof of military involvement wouldn't be lost if one team was eliminated. Jake Rodriguez and Amanda Foster made their way toward the regional airport using concealment techniques they had learned during special operations training. The facility was indeed under surveillance, but the security measures appeared to be focused on preventing unauthorized departures rather than detecting incoming personnel. They were able to observe the airport operations from concealed positions while planning their approach. Marcus, Sarah, and David approached the military installation through terrain that provided natural concealment until they reached the perimeter security zone. The base appeared to be operating under heightened security protocols, with additional guards and enhanced surveillance systems that hadn't been present during Marcus's previous visits. The increased security suggested that the base command was aware of the broader military operation taking place. Amanda's electronic surveillance equipment revealed that the airport was being used as a coordination point for military operations in the region. Multiple aircraft were arriving and departing on schedules that didn't match normal civilian or military flight patterns. The facility had been quietly taken over by forces involved in the conspiracy, making any attempt to use it for escape extremely dangerous. David Park's observation of the military base revealed similar signs of unusual activity. Personnel who should have been off duty were present in large numbers, and equipment that wasn't normally stationed at the facility had been moved in recently. The base was clearly serving as a staging area for operations related to the larger conspiracy, making it unlikely that Marcus would find loyal officers who could be trusted with evidence. Sarah Chen proposed an alternative approach that would avoid directly confronting the hostile forces at either location. A nearby telecommunications facility might provide access to communication systems that could be used to contact loyal government officials in Washington. The facility would have its own security measures, but those would be designed to prevent unauthorized access rather than to contain escaped military personnel. Jake Rodriguez's reconnaissance of the airport revealed that one of the aircraft on the ground was a civilian helicopter that appeared to be only lightly guarded. His demolitions expertise included knowledge of aircraft systems, and he believed he could bypass the security systems and start the helicopter if Amanda could disable any tracking or communication devices that might alert their pursuers to the theft. Marcus's team reached the telecommunications facility just as David's analysis of intercepted communications revealed that search teams were closing in on their general area. Time was running out before their enemies would locate them, and their window for contacting outside authorities was closing rapidly. The team would have to act immediately if they hoped to expose the conspiracy before it could be fully implemented. The telecommunications facility was protected by civilian security measures that were much less sophisticated than military installations they had encountered. Sarah Chen's tactical skills allowed the team to bypass perimeter security and gain access to the building without triggering alarm systems. However, they still needed to locate communication equipment that could reach government officials who weren't part of the conspiracy. Amanda Foster's communication expertise proved crucial as she accessed the facility's long-distance transmission capabilities. However, many of the government telephone numbers they attempted to call either didn't answer or were answered by individuals whose responses suggested that the conspiracy's influence had spread throughout federal agencies. Finding trustworthy contacts was proving more difficult than gaining access to communication systems. A.J. Rodriguez successfully accessed the helicopter at the airport, but discovered that the aircraft had been disabled in ways that would require extensive mechanical work to repair. The sabotage appeared to be routine security measures rather than specific anti-theft precautions, but the effect was the same. The helicopter couldn't be used for immediate escape from the area. As both teams worked desperately to establish contact with loyal authorities, David Park's continued monitoring of conspiracy communications revealed that the next phase of their operation was scheduled to begin within hours. Multiple infrastructure targets would be attacked simultaneously, creating the national emergency that would justify military intervention in civilian government. Time had run out for a carefully planned response. They would have to take immediate action with whatever resources they had available. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Amanda Foster had been systematically calling news organizations when she reached Rebecca Martinez, an investigative journalist with a reputation for exposing government corruption. Martinez had been investigating unusual military movements for several weeks and immediately recognized the significance of the evidence Marcus's team had recovered from the dam. More importantly, she had secure communication channels that could bypass the electronic surveillance networks the conspirators had established. Marcus made the critical decision to trust Martinez with their evidence, transmitting digital copies of the explosive device component's serial numbers and David Park's intelligence analysis through her secure network. The journalist had contacts within Congress and the federal judiciary who had been suspicious of recent military activities and were positioned to take immediate action if provided with concrete evidence of a conspiracy. Sarah Chen coordinated the transmission while maintaining security protocols that would prevent the conspirators from tracing the communication back to their location. The telecommunications facility's equipment allowed them to route their transmission through multiple relay points, making it nearly impossible for hostile forces to triangulate their position. However, they knew that time was running out before search teams would locate them. Jake Rodriguez and Amanda, still at the airport, made the decision to create a diversion that would draw attention away from Marcus's team at the telecommunications facility. Using his demolitions expertise, Jake rigged several small explosive charges around non-critical airport infrastructure, timing them to create a series of attention-getting explosions without causing casualties. The diversion would give Marcus's team additional time to complete their evidence transmission. David Park's final analysis of intercepted communications revealed that the conspiracy included several senior Pentagon officials who had been secretly coordinating with military contractors and defense industry executives. The planned destruction of infrastructure would create massive profits for companies positioned to provide emergency reconstruction services, adding a financial motive to what had initially appeared to be purely political coup attempt. Rebecca Martinez worked with remarkable speed to verify the evidence and contact her sources within the federal government. Within 30 minutes of receiving the transmission, she had reached federal judge Catherine Walsh, who had the authority to issue emergency warrants that would allow loyal federal agents to arrest conspiracy participants before they could implement the next phase of their operation. The journalists' network included former military officers who had maintained contacts within active duty units not involved in the conspiracy. These officers were able to verify the authenticity of the evidence and provide additional information about unusual orders and deployments they had observed. The corroborating evidence strengthened the case for immediate federal intervention to stop the conspiracy. Marcus received confirmation that federal authorities were taking action, just as search teams began surrounding the telecommunications facility. FBI agents loyal to the constitutional government were simultaneously raiding military bases and contractor facilities identified in David's intelligence analysis, arresting key conspiracy participants before they could coordinate their response or destroy additional evidence. Sarah Chen's tactical assessment identified an escape route from the telecommunications facility that would avoid the search teams closing in on their location. However, the route required abandoning their communication equipment and moving through terrain that would make it impossible to coordinate with Jake and Amanda at the airport. The team would have to trust that their evidence transmission had been successful and that federal authorities could complete the investigation without additional assistance. The explosions Jake had rigged at the airport served their intended purpose, drawing military resources away from other search areas and creating confusion that allowed Marcus's team to escape from the telecommunications facility. However, the diversionary tactic also alerted conspiracy leaders that their operation had been compromised, accelerating their timeline for implementing emergency measures before federal authorities could complete their arrests. Amanda Foster's final communication with Marcus's team included crucial intelligence about the conspiracy's command structure that David Park had extracted from intercepted transmissions. Admiral Richardson, who had originally briefed Marcus on the dam mission, was serving as the operational coordinator for military units involved in the conspiracy, but he was receiving orders from civilian officials within the defense contracting industry. Federal agents arrived at the telecommunications facility just minutes after Marcus's team had escaped, finding evidence of their presence but missing the opportunity to provide immediate protection. However, the agents did recover additional communication intercepts that Amanda had recorded, providing federal investigators with a complete picture of the conspiracy's communication networks and operational procedures. Judge Catherine Walsh's emergency warrants allowed federal authorities to arrest over 40 military officers and defense industry executives within a 6-hour period. The coordinated raids prevented the implementation of the infrastructure attacks that would have created the national emergency the conspirators needed to justify martial law. The conspiracy was effectively neutralized before it could achieve its primary objectives. Marcus and his team reached a federal safe house established by FBI agents who had been alerted by Rebecca Martinez's investigation. The facility provided secure communication with federal authorities and medical attention for injuries the team had sustained during their escape from the dam area. For the first time in over 24 hours, they were safe from pursuit by hostile military forces. Jake Rodriguez and Amanda Foster were extracted from the airport area by federal agents who had taken control of the facility during the broader raid operations. The helicopter Jake had attempted to repair was actually owned by one of the defense contractors involved in the conspiracy, and the aircraft contained additional evidence about the financial aspects of the planned infrastructure attacks. The evidence recovered from the dam proved crucial in federal prosecutions that followed the exposure of the conspiracy. Jake's careful disarmament of the explosive devices had preserved enough forensic evidence to trace the supply chain back to specific military contractors and the officers who had authorized the equipment transfers. The prosecutions resulted in lengthy prison sentences for dozens of conspiracy participants. Sarah Chen's tactical analysis of the conspiracy's operational structure became a case study for federal agencies responsible for preventing future military coup attempts. Her work identified security vulnerabilities in communication and command systems that were subsequently addressed through policy changes designed to make coordination between rogue military units much more difficult. David Park received commendation from federal intelligence agencies for his analysis of the intercepted communications, which provided the foundation for understanding how the conspiracy had been organized and funded. His work led to the discovery of similar networks in other countries, where defense contractors were attempting to destabilize governments to create profitable reconstruction opportunities. Amanda Foster's communication intercept techniques were adopted by federal agencies responsible for monitoring potential threats to constitutional government. Her equipment modifications and procedural innovations became standard tools for detecting unauthorized coordination between military units and civilian contractors involved in illegal activities. Rebecca Martinez received multiple journalism awards for her role in exposing the conspiracy, but more importantly, her secure communication networks became a model for protecting whistleblowers who needed to transmit sensitive evidence to government authorities without alerting the subjects of their investigations. Marcus Sullivan was eventually promoted to admiral, but more significantly, he was appointed to lead a new federal task force responsible for preventing military contractors from influencing defense policy in ways that could compromise national security. His experience during the dam mission provided him with unique insights into how private financial interests could corrupt military decision-making processes. The dam itself was thoroughly inspected and upgraded with enhanced security measures designed to prevent future infiltration attempts. The facility became a test site for new security technologies that could detect unauthorized explosive devices and prevent sabotage of critical infrastructure. The lessons learned from the conspiracy were implemented at vulnerable facilities throughout the country. Federal investigations revealed that the conspiracy had been years in development, with defense contractors gradually placing their allies in key military positions while identifying infrastructure targets that would create maximum disruption if attacked simultaneously. The planning had been sophisticated enough that it might have succeeded if Marcus's team hadn't accidentally discovered the dam operation. The prosecutions that followed the conspiracy's exposure led to significant reforms in how defense contracts were awarded and monitored. New oversight procedures were implemented to prevent contractors from using their government relationships to influence military operations or policy decisions that could benefit their business interests. Judge Catherine Walsh's rapid response to the evidence provided by Marcus's team became a model for judicial procedures designed to address threats to constitutional government. Her emergency warrant authority was expanded and systematized to ensure that future conspiracies could be disrupted quickly before they could implement their plans. Marcus maintained contact with his team members as they pursued new assignments within the reformed military structure. Their shared experience during the DAM mission had created bonds of trust and loyalty that continued throughout their careers, and they remained vigilant for signs of future threats to constitutional government. The abandoned mining tunnels that had provided crucial escape routes for the team were mapped and secured by federal authorities, but they were also preserved as a reminder of how American military personnel had used their ingenuity and determination to protect constitutional government when it was threatened by enemies from within. Years later, Marcus would reflect on how close the conspiracy had come to success and how much had depended on his team's ability to recognize that their mission had been compromised. The DAM operation had been designed to eliminate them while providing cover for a much larger attack on American democracy. But their training, loyalty, and willingness to sacrifice personal safety had prevented a catastrophic assault on constitutional government. The story of their mission became classified immediately after the federal prosecutions were complete, but the lessons learned from their experience were incorporated into training programs for military officers responsible for protecting critical infrastructure. Future generations of military personnel would be better prepared to recognize and respond to similar threats because of the courage Marcus and his team had shown during their darkest hour beneath the dam.